The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.
Hey, it's Cashflow Mike, and I'll tell you what, let me ask you something, right? Have you ever finished a client call during the tax season and then immediately thought, okay, what was I supposed to do for him next? Or before your brain even finishes processing that thought, the next client is already on the calendar, and then the next one, and then the next one. And well, that's tax season, right? And it's not just one big problem, it's dozens of small problems with no pause in between. And here's the part nobody says out loud, right? Most advisors aren't overwhelmed because they don't know what they're doing. They're overwhelmed because they're carrying too much unfinished conversations at a time. It's not work. It's the metal switching, right? It's one client has a cash flow crisis. One client's behind on payroll taxes. One client wants to buy equipment. One client wants to hire. One client's doing great and doesn't know why. One client's panicking because they owe money. You just go from one conversation to the next like nothing happened. But something did happen. Your brain doesn't reset though, right? It just stacks all these little problems on top of each other. And here's the reality of tax season. You don't have one job, you've got 20, and every one of them feels urgent because every client has a different version of the most important thing. Client A, we need to cut expenses. Client B, we need more sales. Client C, we need financing. Client D, we need better reporting. Client E, we need to stop bleeding cash. And the hard part? They're all right. So you're not dealing with one fire. You're not dealing with one burning issue. You're dealing with a room full of smoke alarms that are going off at the same time, and every one of them is screaming, look at me next. Now, here's what's important. This breaks even with the great advisors, because being great at advisory work doesn't mean you're immune to mental fatigue. It just means you notice more. You see more issues. You see more possibilities. You hear the subtext. So the better you get, the heavier it gets. And that's why the most capable advisors often feel the most pressure during tax season, because they don't just see the numbers, they see the story, and they know what's at stake. And here's the part that nobody is teaching. Every client meeting creates unresolved decisions, and those decisions don't disappear, they stick to you. And you end the meeting and think, okay, we need to talk about receivables. We need to talk about model payroll. We need to talk about revisiting pricing or forecasting cash or restructuring debt. And then the meeting ends and you move on, but your brain doesn't. It carries that unfinished decision like a tab that's left open. And if you see your Google, it's a tab and then another tab, then another tab, then another tab. And pretty soon you got 40 tabs open. And you don't really know which one's playing the music. That's context switching fatigue. It's not a productivity problem, it's cognitive overload. Now, somebody always says, well, you just need a better system, or you just need to write better notes. Let me tell you something. Tax season doesn't break advisors because they don't take notes. It breaks them because there's no recovery time. You don't get 30 minutes to just sit down and think. You get 30 seconds to reset your brain, and then you're expected to sound confident again. And the client can feel that. They may not say it, but they can definitely feel it, because the question always comes. Eventually, every client's going to ask you the same thing. All right, Mike, what do we do next? And if you hesitate, even for just a second, the confidence drops. Not because you're not smart, it's because you're tired. And this is where a lot of advisors get stuck, because most tools don't help here. Most tools just show you information. They're going to show you trends and ratios and graphs. They show you a nice, clean dashboard. But tax season doesn't require more charts. It requires decision control, because you're not trying to understand the business. You're trying to hold 20 businesses in your head. And then you got to make 20 next step decisions without collapsing. And the truth is, Dashboards don't reduce your mental load. They just add to it. So during tax season, advisors don't need more data. They need a way to narrow the focus, and they need a way to make decisions, to decide what matters most right now. Not eventually, not someday, not this year, right now. Because if you don't pick the right priority, you can spend an entire meeting talking about the wrong thing, and it's subtle. You can do an amazing job explaining the numbers and still leave the client stuck. And that's the moment that hits the hardest, because you didn't fail. You were almost helpful. So let me say this really clearly. Tax season breaks focus because it creates constant switching without closure. Every client meeting ends with unfinished decisions, incomplete clarity, and the next step that you don't have time to define. Then the next meeting is going to begin, and your brain is going to be forced to jump to the next thing, and then it jumps again, and then jumps. And pretty soon you stop trusting your own thinking, not because you don't know, but because you can't hold anything long enough to decide what matters most. That's what that context switching fatigue really is. And that's why May matters. May, because May is not about giving you more education. May is about giving you a system that's going to hold the weight for you, a system that's going to help you walk into a client meeting and know, here's the issue, here's the fuel source, here's what we do next. So you don't have to carry 20 open tabs in your head. The system's going to carry it. And you just get to show up and act like an expert again. So if tax season feels heavier than it should, it's not because you're behind or you're not good at advisory. It's that you're doing decision work without a decision system. And that breaks even the greatest advisors. So next week, we're going to be talking about what happens when numbers are correct, but that client still doesn't move. Because that's the real tax season trap. That moment, we know it. And the clear path to cash was built for that moment. I'll see you next week.
The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful,